The rain poured like judgment from an angry god, relentless and cold against my skin. My thin uniform clung to my body as I ran through the darkened parking lot, mascara streaming down my face, mixing with raindrops and tears. Thunder crashed overhead, an exclamation point to the disaster my evening had become. Keys, 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 I muttered, digging frantically through my soaked purse. The contents were a jumbled mess, just like my life. 24 years old, waitressing at an upscale restaurant where the tips were decent, but the management was hell, and now stranded in a storm because I'd forgotten to pay my car insurance. They'd repossessed it while I was mid-shift, leaving nothing but an empty parking space and a notice stuck to the ground with chewing gum. My fingers touched metal, not my keys, but the emergency hairpin I always carried. Useless. I swallowed a sob as lightning illuminated the parking lot, revealing a sleek black car at the far end. An Aston Martin, the kind that cost more than I'd make in 10 years. The kind of car that screamed money, power, and everything I didn't have. It sat there in pristine silence, a beacon in the storm. Something about it pulled at me, whispered possibilities. I approached cautiously, peering through the windows, empty. And, miracle of miracles, unlocked. Just for a minute, I whispered to myself, glancing around nervously. Just until the rain stops, the door opened with a soft click, and I slid into the passenger seat, immediately enveloped by the scent of expensive leather and something else, something dark and masculine that made my stomach tighten. Sandalwood, amber, and a hint of whiskey. I closed my eyes, feeling my heartbeat slow as warmth seeped back into my trembling limbs. This was someone's sanctuary, someone powerful. I could feel it in the meticulously clean interior, the understated luxury. No flashy accessories or unnecessary embellishments. Just pure, contained power. I should leave. Every instinct told me to get out of this car before its owner returned. But the rain hammered against the roof, and exhaustion weighed me down like concrete. I'd worked a double shift on 3 hours of sleep. My apartment was miles away, and I had no car, no ride, and no money for a cab. 5 minutes, I murmured, leaning my head back against the soft leather headrest. Just 5 minutes. Then I'll go. I didn't mean to close my eyes. I didn't mean to let my guard down, but the gentle purr of the ventilation system and the rhythmic patter of rain against the windows lulled me into a state of half-consciousness. In that moment of weakness, I didn't hear the driver's door open. I didn't sense his presence until the car dipped slightly with his weight, and a wave of that intoxicating scent, stronger now, mixed with rain and night air, washed over me. My eyes flew open. My heart stopped. He sat perfectly still, one hand on the steering wheel, the other holding a phone that glowed blue in the darkness. He wasn't looking at me yet, but I could feel the controlled tension in his body, the careful restraint of someone who had just found an intruder in their personal space. In the dim light, I could make out an expensive suit, charcoal gray, and perfectly tailored to broad shoulders. A gold watch glinted on his wrist, heavy and masculine. His profile was sharp, all angles and shadows, a straight nose, high cheekbones, and a jaw that could cut glass. Dark hair, slightly damp from the rain, swept back from his forehead. When he finally turned to face me, I felt the air leave my lungs. His eyes were the color of whiskey held up to firelight, amber and burning. They fixed on me with an intensity that pinned me to the seat. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "This," he said, his voice low and controlled with an accent I couldn't place, "is not an Uber." My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Up close, I could see the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw, the slight curl of his dark lashes, the perfect bow of his lips, now pressed into a thin line of displeasure. "I'm so sorry," I finally managed to whisper, my voice embarrassingly small. My car was repossessed, and the rain. I just needed shelter for a moment. "I'll go right now." I reached for the door handle, but his hand shot out, catching my wrist. His grip wasn't painful, but it was unyielding, like warm steel wrapped in velvet. His touch sent electric shocks up my arm, and I froze, trapped between fear and something else, something dangerous and unnamed. "You're soaking wet," he observed, his eyes traveling over my drenched uniform. A simple black dress now clinging to every curve of my body. I felt naked under his gaze, exposed in ways that had nothing to do with the thin, wet fabric. "I'm also getting your upholstery wet," I said, attempting a weak smile. "Another reason I should leave." He didn't smile back. Instead, his eyes narrowed slightly, assessing me with the cool calculation of someone who was used to sizing people up in seconds. I had the distinct impression I was being categorized, filed away in some mental system. His thumb moved almost imperceptibly against the inside of my wrist, where my pulse raced beneath his touch. "What's your name?" he asked. Not a request, a command. "Elise Parker." He nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. "Elise Parker, the waitress who brought me the Macallan 25, neat, 2 hours ago." My blood ran cold. He had been in the restaurant. I tried to recall serving him, but the evening had been a blur of faces and orders, and my own distraction after discovering my car was gone. "I didn't recognize you," I admitted. One corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been amusement. "Most people don't. It's by design." He still hadn't released my wrist, and I was becoming increasingly aware of his warmth, his proximity, the enclosed space we shared while rain drummed against the roof. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face for a split second, revealing something predatory in his gaze that made my stomach flip. "Mr. I prompted, suddenly desperate to put a name to this man who held me captive with nothing more than a touch and a look. "Russo," he said after a moment's hesitation. "Dominic Russo." The name hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken meaning. It should have been just a name, 2 words, 7 letters, but something in his tone, in the way the syllables rolled off his tongue, suggested significance. Power. Warning. "Well, Mr. Russo," I said, trying to inject some confidence into my voice. "I apologize for the intrusion. If you could let go of my wrist, I'll get out of your car and let you get on with your evening." His eyes flickered to where his fingers encircled my wrist, as if he'd forgotten he was still holding me. Slowly, deliberately, he released me, but the phantom pressure of his touch lingered on my skin. "And go where, exactly?" he asked. "Back into the storm? Without a car? At this hour?" I glanced out the window. The rain had, if anything, intensified. The parking lot was now completely deserted except for his car and a black SUV parked nearby. The restaurant had closed for the night. Even the staff would be gone by now. "I'll figure something out," I said, more bravely than I felt. "I always do." The sound was non-committal, but his eyes never left mine. "The same way you figured out breaking into a stranger's car was a good idea?" Heat rushed to my cheeks. The door was unlocked. A fortunate circumstance for you. Less fortunate for others, perhaps. There was a subtle threat in his words, but also something else, a hint of amusement, maybe even intrigue. I couldn't read him, couldn't get a handle on whether I was in danger or not. The rational part of my brain screamed that I should be terrified, but another part, a reckless, curious part, was fascinated by the man beside me. "Where do you live, Elise Parker?" he asked, breaking the tense silence. The question sent a chill down my spine. "I don't think I should tell you that." He laughed then, a rich, deep sound that transformed his face, softening the hard edges into something almost approachable. Almost. "Smart girl," he said, and the approval in his tone warmed me inexplicably. "You shouldn't tell strange men where you live, especially not men you find sitting in cars you've broken into." "I didn't break," I began, but stopped when I saw the amusement in his eyes. He was toying with me and I'd fallen for it. With a fluid movement that spoke of natural athleticism, he reached inside his jacket. I tensed, but he merely produced a sleek phone, different from the one he'd been holding when he entered the car. He pressed a button, and the glass partition separating the front seats from what I now realized was a much larger rear compartment slid down silently. "Anton," he said, not raising his voice but infusing it with unmistakable authority. "Miss Parker needs a ride home." Only then did I notice the broad-shouldered silhouette of a driver in the front seat. He hadn't been there when I'd gotten in, had he? A cold feeling washed over me. Had I been so desperate, so careless, that I hadn't even checked properly? "Yes, sir," came the immediate reply. No questions, no hesitation. "I don't need—" I started to protest, but Dominic cut me off with a single look. "You do," he said firmly, and I'm offering. The alternative is walking home in this weather, which I suspect would take you hours and result in pneumonia at best. He was right, and we both knew it. Still, something in me rebelled at the thought of accepting help from this stranger, no matter how expensive his car or how compelling his presence. Why would you help me? I asked, suspicious. I'm nobody to you. His eyes darkened, and for a moment, I glimpsed something dangerous lurking beneath the polished exterior. Perhaps I'm merely repaying the excellent service you provided earlier. It was a lie. We both knew it. There was something else at play here, some agenda I couldn't see. Or perhaps, he continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper that forced me to lean in slightly to hear him. I'm curious about the kind of woman who would choose to hide in my car, of all the cars in that parking lot. His words sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with my wet clothes. It was just chance, I said weakly. Your car was unlocked. I don't believe in chance, Elise Parker. The way he said my name, slowly, savoring each syllable, made it sound like a secret between us. Every choice has consequences. Every action creates ripples. The air between us seemed to thicken, charged with something I couldn't name. His proximity was intoxicating, confusing my senses and clouding my judgment. I needed to get away, to clear my head and put distance between myself and this man who radiated danger and temptation in equal measure. I'll accept the ride, I said finally, my voice steadier than I expected. Thank you. Something flickered in his eyes, satisfaction, perhaps. He nodded once, then pressed a button. The partition rose silently, giving us privacy once more. Your address? He asked. I hesitated, then gave it to him. He relayed it to the driver through what must have been an intercom system, then settled back in his seat, turning slightly to face me. Now, he said, his voice soft but commanding. Tell me about your car. I shifted uncomfortably under his gaze, hyper-aware of my damp clothes and disheveled appearance. What about my car? Why was it repossessed? His question was direct, no cushioning, no pretense that it wasn't an invasive thing to ask a stranger. I missed payments, I admitted, feeling heat rise to my cheeks. 3 months' worth. I had to choose between insurance and rent. He nodded, as if this was exactly what he'd expected to hear. And the rent one. I can sleep in an apartment. I can't sleep in a car that's been towed away. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. Practical. I appreciate practicality. The car moved silently through the rain-slicked streets, the world outside a blur of neon lights and shadows. I had no idea what time it was, but the city had that hollow emptiness that comes in the small hours, when even the most determined partygoers have surrendered to sleep. Do you always interrogate women you find in your car? I asked, trying to regain some control over the situation. Dominic's eyes glinted in the dim light. You're the first woman I've found in my car uninvited, so I have no precedent to follow. Lucky me, I murmured, looking down at my hands folded in my lap. Indeed, he replied, and something in his tone made me look up sharply. He was watching me with an intensity that was almost physical, as if he could see beneath my skin to the flutter of my pulse, the quickening of my breath. You're trembling, he observed. I'm cold. It wasn't entirely a lie. My wet clothes clung to my body, but the car was warm, and the real source of my trembling had nothing to do with temperature. Without a word, he shrugged off his suit jacket and held it out to me. The gesture was so unexpected that I stared at it for a moment before tentatively reaching out to take it. Our fingers brushed, and that same electric shock raced up my arm. The jacket was still warm from his body, and as I draped it over my shoulders, I was enveloped in his scent, that intoxicating blend of sandalwood, amber, and something uniquely him. It was heavy, expensive wool that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and far too large for me. I felt like a child playing dress-up, but also strangely protected, as if the jacket were armor against the world. Thank you, I said softly. He inclined his head slightly but said nothing, his eyes never leaving mine. The silence between us stretched, taut with unspoken questions and possibilities. Tell me about yourself, Elise Parker, he said finally, breaking the silence but not the tension. I laughed nervously. There's not much to tell. Everyone has a story. He settled back in his seat, one arm stretched along the back of the seat, fingers inches from my shoulder. "What's yours?" Maybe it was exhaustion, or the surreal quality of the night, or the way he looked at me, as if I were a puzzle he was determined to solve. But I found myself talking. I told him about growing up in a small town 2 states away, about the community college degree in business administration I'd earned through night classes while working full-time, about the string of jobs that never quite paid enough, and the dream of opening my own small cafe someday that seemed to slip further away with each passing month. He listened with unnerving focus, asking occasional questions that revealed how carefully he was paying attention. Where most people's eyes would glaze over, his remained sharp, assessing, cataloging every word. "And your family?" he asked. "Mom died when I was 16, cancer," I said, the words automatic after years of answering the same question. "Dad remarried a year later. We don't talk much." "Siblings?" I shook my head. "Only child." Something flickered in his eyes, understanding, perhaps, or recognition. "As am I," he said quietly. The admission felt strangely intimate, a small piece of himself offered in exchange for my story. It made me bold enough to ask, "And what's your story, Mr. Russo?" His smile was enigmatic. "Call me Dominic." "Dominic," I repeated, testing the name on my tongue. It suited him. Strong, classic, with a hint of something ancient and powerful. "My story is complicated," he said after a moment's consideration. "And not particularly suited for first meetings in borrowed cars. Is that what this is? A first meeting?" His eyes darkened. "Do you want it to be?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I should say no. I should thank him for the ride and walk away when we reached my apartment. I should forget those amber eyes and the way they seemed to see right through me. But something reckless stirred inside me, a hunger for more than the careful, practical life I'd built for myself, a life that was falling apart despite all my caution. Before I could answer, the car slowed and came to a smooth stop. I glanced out the window and recognized my run-down apartment building, its brick facade worn and weathered, the front steps crumbling at the edges. "It appears we've arrived," Dominic said, his voice neutral. But I thought I detected a hint of disappointment. "Yes," I replied, suddenly reluctant to leave the warm cocoon of his car, his presence. "Thank you for the ride." I started to shrug off his jacket, but his hand on my arm stopped me. "Keep it," he said. "You can return it another time." Another time. The word sent a thrill through me that I tried to suppress. "I don't know when I'll see you again, don't you?" His smile was knowing, confident. "I dine at Bellissimo every Friday evening at 8, table 15. The implication was clear. If I wanted to see him again, I knew where to find him. The ball was in my court, or at least, that's what he wanted me to believe. Something told me that Dominic Russo was not a man who left anything to chance. I nodded, not quite trusting my voice. I reached for the door handle, but before I could open it, Anton appeared outside, opening the door and holding an umbrella over the space between the car and my building entrance. "Good night, Elise," Dominic said, his voice low and intimate. "Good night, Dominic." I stepped out of the car, clutching his jacket around me against the chill of the early morning air. Anton escorted me to the door of my building, silent and efficient, then melted back into the night without a word. I didn't look back as I climbed the stairs to my third-floor apartment, though I could feel the weight of Dominic's gaze following me until I disappeared from view. The jacket hung on the back of my bedroom door for a week. Sometimes, when I couldn't sleep, I would press my face to the expensive wool and breathe in the lingering scent of him, letting my mind wander down dangerous paths. I told myself I wouldn't go to Bellissimo on Friday. I told myself I would send the jacket back with a thank you note and forget about Dominic Russo and his burning amber eyes. I told myself a lot of things, but when Friday came, I requested to work the dinner shift. I told myself it was because the tips were better, not because I wanted to see him again. I was lying to myself, and I knew it. Table 15 was in the far corner of the restaurant, partially secluded by an architectural feature that gave it more privacy than the other tables. It was reserved permanently, my manager told me when I asked to serve it, for a very important client who valued his privacy. The way she said it, with a mixture of respect and fear, made me wonder just who Dominic Russo was. At precisely 8 o'clock, he arrived. Not alone, as I had foolishly imagined, but with 2 men in suits who flanked him like shadows. They scanned the restaurant with watchful eyes before one of them nodded, and only then did Dominic enter. He wore a different suit tonight, midnight blue, impeccably tailored to his powerful frame. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, commanding attention without seeking it. Conversations hushed as he passed, heads turned subtly to watch him, and then quickly away, as if afraid to be caught staring. I stood frozen by the bar, his jacket folded neatly in a bag at my feet, my heart hammering against my ribs. What was I doing? This man was clearly someone important, someone powerful, someone far out of my league. The past week of fantasies suddenly seemed childish and naive. But then he saw me, and something in his expression shifted. The cool mask of indifference melted into recognition, into pleasure. He changed course, heading directly toward me, and the world narrowed to just the 2 of us. "Elise," he said, my name a caress on his lips. "You're here." I swallowed hard. "I work here, remember?" A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Indeed." "And my jacket?" I bent down to retrieve the bag, our fingers brushing as I handed it to him. The same electric current ran between us, and I wondered if he felt it too. "Thank you again," I said, hating how breathy my voice sounded. "For the ride, and for lending me this. It was my pleasure." His eyes held mine, saying much more than his words. One of the men behind him cleared his throat discreetly, and Dominic's expression hardened for a moment before returning to the warm intensity I was already addicted to. "Will you be serving my table tonight?" "If you'd like," I said, trying to sound professional rather than eager. "I would." 2 simple words, yet they carried the weight of promise. I nodded and watched as he continued to his table, the 2 men taking positions at a nearby table, their eyes constantly sweeping the room. The night passed in a blur of stolen glances and brief touches as I served Dominic's table. He ate alone, though his phone rang occasionally. Each time he would answer with just a few words, his voice too low for me to hear. Once, he spoke in what sounded like Italian, the language flowing from his tongue with native fluency. As the restaurant began to empty, his presence became more commanding, as if the space was adjusting to accommodate him rather than the other way around. I found myself gravitating toward his table more often than necessary, drawn by an invisible force I couldn't resist. "Join me," he said, as I cleared his dessert plate, tiramisu, barely touched. "I'm working," I replied, though my shift had technically ended 20 minutes earlier. "Are you?" His knowing smile told me he was well aware of that fact. "1 drink, Elise. That's all I'm asking." I hesitated, balanced on the knife's edge of decision. 1 drink with a man I barely knew, a man who radiated danger and power in equal measure, a man who made my heart race and my common sense falter. 1 drink, I agreed finally, setting down the dessert plate. I went to the back to hang up my apron and check my appearance in the small mirror in the staff bathroom. My reflection stared back at me, cheeks flushed, eyes bright with anticipation and fear. "What are you doing?" I whispered to myself. There was no good answer. When I returned, Dominic had dismissed everyone, the other waitstaff, the busboys, even his own men, with what must have been a generous tip, judging by their eager compliance. The restaurant was now empty except for us and the kitchen staff, who were far enough away that their clattering and conversation created only a distant backdrop. He stood as I approached, pulling out a chair for me with old-world courtesy. A glass of amber liquid, whiskey I guessed, waited for me. "Macallan 25, he said, noting my glance. "I thought you might like to taste what you've been serving." I sat down, hyper-aware of his proximity as he took his seat beside me rather than across the table. The whiskey burned pleasantly as I sipped it, warming me from the inside out. "Tell me something, Elise," he said, his voice low and intimate. "Why did you come tonight?" The question caught me off guard. I could have lied, could have said I was just returning his jacket, but something in those amber eyes demanded honesty. "I wanted to see you again," I admitted, the whiskey making me bold. "I don't know why. I don't know anything about you." "What would you like to know?" he asked, his fingers tracing patterns on the tablecloth dangerously close to my hand. Who are you, really? The question had been burning inside me all week. Those men who came with you, they're not just friends, are they? Dominic's expression remained unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes. Calculation, perhaps, or caution. No, he said finally. They're not friends, they're employees. Security? He inclined his head slightly, among other things. Why do you need security to eat dinner? A smile ghosted across his lips. The world can be a dangerous place, Elise. Especially for some people. People like you? I pressed, knowing I was pushing boundaries but unable to stop myself. His hand covered mine, warm and strong. Yes, people like me. The touch sent heat spiraling through me, pooling low in my belly. I should pull away. I should ask more questions. I should demand straight answers. Instead, I turned my hand over, letting our palms meet, fingers intertwining. His thumb brushed over my wrist, finding my pulse, which betrayed my racing heart. You should be careful, he murmured, leaning closer. Curiosity can be hazardous. Is that a threat? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. A warning. His gaze dropped to my lips, then back to my eyes. I'm not a good man, Elise. Then why am I still here? His smile was dangerous, predatory. That's the question, isn't it? The world narrowed to the space between us, to his hand holding mine, to the heat in his amber eyes. I knew I should leave, knew I was stepping into something I didn't understand, but I couldn't make myself pull away. Dance with me, he said suddenly, the words both question and command. I glanced around the empty restaurant. There's no music. Without breaking eye contact, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. A few taps later, soft, haunting music filled the air. A slow, sensual melody that seemed to wrap around us like silk. He stood, still holding my hand, and pulled me gently to my feet. There's always music, Elise. You just have to know where to find it. We moved to a small space between tables, and his hand settled at the small of my back, drawing me close. I placed my free hand on his shoulder, feeling the solid strength beneath the expensive fabric of his suit. He was taller than me by nearly a foot, forcing me to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. We began to move, and I realized immediately that Dominic Russo danced the way he did everything else, with confident precision and natural grace. He led with subtle pressure from his hand on my back, guiding me effortlessly through steps I didn't know I could follow. You dance well, he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. I'm following your lead, I admitted. His hand tightened slightly at my waist. Smart girl. The song changed to something slower, more intimate, and Dominic drew me closer until my body was pressed against his. I could feel the steady beat of his heart, smell that intoxicating scent that had lingered on his jacket all week, sense the controlled power in his movements. What are we doing, Dominic? I whispered, my cheek against his chest. His hand moved up my back, fingers splaying across my shoulder blades. Dancing, Elise. You know that's not what I mean. He pulled back slightly to look at me, his expression serious. What do you want us to be doing? The question hung between us, laden with possibility. What did I want? I barely knew this man, yet I was drawn to him with an intensity that frightened me. Everything about him screamed danger. Yet here I was, in his arms, wanting more. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know anything about you, except that you're probably dangerous and definitely out of my league. A shadow of a smile crossed his face. Perceptive, on both counts. His hand came up to cut my cheek, his thumb brushing across my bottom lip. But you're still here. My breath caught in my throat. I'm still here. Why? It was my turn to be questioned, to be analyzed under that amber gaze. Because when I'm with you, I feel alive. Like I've been sleepwalking through my life, and you woke me up. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps, or recognition. His hand slid from my cheek to the nape of my neck, fingers tangling in my hair. Dangerous indeed, he murmured, and then he was kissing me. His lips were firm and confident, claiming mine with a possessiveness that sent heat spiraling through me. The kiss deepened, his tongue teasing the seam of my lips until I opened for him with a soft sigh. He tasted of expensive whiskey and forbidden promises, and I melted against him, my arms winding around his neck. One kiss became many, each more intense than the last. His hands mapped my body through the thin fabric of my uniform, leaving trails of fire in their wake. I moaned into his mouth as his fingers found the zip at the back of my dress, slowly lowering it inch by inch. "Not here," I gasped, pulling away slightly. The restaurant might be empty, but the kitchen staff was still nearby, and the windows faced the street. Dominic's eyes were dark with desire, his breathing as uneven as mine. "My car is outside." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. He pressed one more searing kiss to my lips, then stepped back, taking my hand in his. I hurriedly zipped my dress back up with my free hand, suddenly self-conscious under his hungry gaze. He led me through the restaurant and out the back door, where the sleek Aston Martin waited, engine running, a different driver than Anton behind the wheel. The man got out immediately as we approached, avoiding eye contact with me as he opened the rear door. Dominic helped me inside, then slid in next to me. The door closed with a soft thud, sealing us into our private world. The privacy partition was already up, giving us complete seclusion. "Where are we going?" I asked, suddenly nervous despite the desire still coursing through my veins. "My place," he said, watching my reaction carefully. "Unless you'd prefer yours?" The thought of taking Dominic Russo to my tiny, run-down apartment, with its second-hand furniture and leaky faucets, was laughable. "Yours," I agreed, trying to sound more confident than I felt. He nodded once, then pressed a button to communicate with the driver. "Home, Marco." The car pulled away from the curb, gliding silently through the nighttime streets. Dominic turned to me, his eyes reflecting the passing streetlights. "Having second thoughts? Should I be?" I countered. His smile was slow and predatory, probably. "Are you going to give me a reason?" Instead of answering, he reached for me, pulling me onto his lap so that I straddled him, my dress riding up my thighs. His hands settled on my waist, thumbs tracing circles on my hip bones through the fabric. "I could give you several," he murmured, leaning up to press hot kisses along the column of my throat. "But right now, all I want to do is this." His mouth found mine again, and rational thought fled. I surrendered to the sensation of his hands on my body, his lips against mine, the hard evidence of his desire pressing against me through his expensive suit pants. Time lost meaning as we kissed, touched, explored, the car's movement adding another layer of sensuality to each caress. When the car finally stopped, I was breathless and disheveled, my lips swollen from his kisses, my body humming with need. Dominic looked equally affected, his hair mussed from my fingers, his eyes dark with barely controlled desire. "We're here," he said, his voice rough. I glanced out the window and gasped. We were in front of a towering high-rise, its glass and steel facade gleaming in the moonlight. It was in the most exclusive part of the city, where penthouse apartments sold for millions, and ordinary people like me only passed through on our way to somewhere else. The driver opened the door and Dominic helped me out, keeping his hand at the small of my back, as he guided me through the marble lobby. The night doorman nodded respectfully, his eyes carefully averted from my rumpled appearance. "Good evening, Mr. Russo." "Evening, James." The exchange was brief, professional, but I didn't miss the subtle note of deference in the doorman's voice. We crossed to a private elevator that opened with the scan of Dominic's fingerprint. Once inside, he pressed the button for the penthouse, the only button on the panel. As the elevator began its ascent, Dominic turned to me, backing me against the mirrored wall. "Last chance to change your mind," he murmured, his eyes searching mine. In answer, I pulled him down to me, kissing him with all the pent-up desire that had been building since that rainy night in his car. He groaned against my mouth, his hands gripping my hips hard enough to bruise as he pressed me against the cool mirror. The elevator chimed softly as we reached the penthouse, but Dominic didn't break the kiss. Instead, he lifted me, and I instinctively wrapped my legs around his waist as he carried me into his home. I caught only glimpses of sleek, minimalist luxury, leather and chrome, glass and dark wood, before we were in his bedroom. He laid me down on a massive bed with sheets so soft they felt like liquid against my skin. Dominic stood at the foot of the bed, watching me with hungry eyes as he slowly removed his tie, then unbuttoned his shirt to reveal a chest sculpted by regular workouts, marred by several scars that only enhanced his dangerous appeal. "You're beautiful," I whispered, propping myself up on my elbows to watch him. "I was just thinking the same about you," he replied, his voice low and rough with desire. He joined me on the bed, his weight pressing me into the mattress as his mouth found mine again. His hands made quick work of my dress, sliding it down my body until I lay beneath him in just my underwear, simple black cotton that suddenly seemed woefully inadequate, but the hunger in his eyes as he looked at me made me feel beautiful, desired, powerful, in a way I'd never experienced before. "Are you sure?" he asked one final time, his control visibly slipping. "Yes," I breathed, pulling him down to me. "Yes." I woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the unfamiliar weight of an arm draped across my waist. For a moment, I was disoriented, the luxurious surroundings so different from my cramped apartment. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back, and I felt heat rise to my cheeks. Dominic Russo. I'd spent the night with Dominic Russo, a man I barely knew. A man who had security guards and a private elevator and moved through the world like he owned it. I turned carefully to look at him. In sleep, his face was softer, younger. The hard edges of control relaxed into something almost vulnerable. Dark lashes rested against his cheeks, and his hair was tousled in a way that made him look almost boyish. One of the scars I'd noticed last night ran from his collarbone down across his left pectoral, a thin, white line that looked like it had been made by a knife. There were others, too. A puckered mark on his right shoulder that could only have been from a bullet. A jagged line along his ribs. What kind of businessman came by scars like these? As if sensing my scrutiny, Dominic's eyes opened, instantly alert. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by that now familiar intensity. "Good morning," he said, his voice husky with sleep. "Morning," I replied, suddenly self-conscious of my nakedness, of the intimacy we'd shared, of the questions swirling in my mind. He reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, his touch gentle. "What are you thinking?" "That I don't know who you are," I said honestly. "Not really." Something shuddered in his eyes, but he didn't look away. "No, you don't." "Are you going to tell me?" He was silent for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on my bare shoulder. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," I said. "But let's start with what you do, because I'm pretty sure it's not just business, like you told me last night." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I did tell you that curiosity can be hazardous." "Is that a threat?" "A fact." His hand moved to my neck, thumb resting lightly against my pulse point. Not threatening, but reminding me of his strength, his control. "Some questions are better left unasked, Elise. And if I ask them anyway," his smile turned predatory, "then you'd better be prepared for the answers." Before I could respond, his phone rang. A sharp, insistent sound that cut through the tension between us. Dominic's expression hardened as he reached for it, checking the screen before answering. "Russo," he said, his voice suddenly cold and businesslike. He listened for a moment, then responded in rapid Italian, the words flowing with native fluency. I watched as he transformed before my eyes, the passionate lover of last night becoming something else entirely, something harder, more dangerous. He rose from the bed, magnificent in his nakedness, and walked to the window, continuing his conversation in that language I couldn't understand. I caught only a few words: familia, problema, subito, but the tone told me everything I needed to know. Whatever this call was about, it was serious. When he ended the call, he stood for a moment with his back to me, shoulders tense, head slightly bowed. Then he turned, and I almost gasped at the change in him. This was not the man who had danced with me, who had made love to me with such passion. This was someone else, someone colder, harder, more remote. "I have to go," he said, already moving to his closet, pulling out clothes with efficient movements. "Business." "Is everything okay?" I asked, clutching the sheet to my chest. He paused, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. "It will be." I watched as he dressed in a suit even more expensive than the one he'd worn last night, his movements precise and controlled. He strapped what looked like a gun holster to his shoulder before shrugging on his jacket, and my blood ran cold. "Dominic?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" He came to sit on the edge of the bed, fully dressed now, a study in controlled power. His hand cupped my cheek, thumb brushing across my bottom lip. "I told you last night, I'm not a good man, Elise." His eyes held mine, serious and intense. "But I want you to stay. Wait for me. I'll be back tonight, and we can talk then." Part of me wanted to run, to grab my clothes and never look back. But a larger part, the part that had been drawn to him from that first moment in the rain, wanted to stay, wanted answers, wanted him. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll stay." Relief flickered in his eyes, so brief I almost missed it. He leaned down to kiss me, a kiss that was both a promise and a claiming. "Make yourself at home," he said, rising. "There's food in the kitchen. Security knows you're here. They won't bother you. But they're there if you need anything. Security." Of course there would be security. I nodded, watching as he checked his phone one more time, then slipped it into his pocket. "Dominic," I called as he reached the bedroom door. He paused, looking back at me. "Be careful." A smile touched his lips, genuine but tinged with something darker. "Always." And then he was gone, leaving me alone in his massive penthouse with more questions than answers, and a growing suspicion that I had stumbled into something far more dangerous than a simple affair. I waited until I heard the elevator doors close before I got out of bed, wrapping the sheet around me like a makeshift toga. The penthouse was even more impressive by daylight. All clean lines and minimalist luxury, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. The kitchen was a chef's dream, all stainless steel and marble. But I bypassed it for now, drawn to the living room where built-in bookshelves lined one wall. Books could tell you a lot about a person, and I was desperate to know more about Dominic Rousseau. The collection was eclectic, classical literature in several languages, books on art and architecture, biographies of historical figures known for their strategic brilliance. Several shelves were dedicated to what looked like first editions, their leather bindings rich with age. But it was a framed photograph on one of the shelves that caught my eye, the only personal touch in the otherwise impersonal space. It showed a younger Dominic, perhaps in his early 20s, standing beside an older man who shared his strong features and penetrating gaze. They were both in formal wear, standing on the steps of what looked like an Italian villa. The older man had his hand on Dominic's shoulder, his expression proud but stern. I was so absorbed in studying the photograph that I didn't hear the elevator until it chimed. Startled, I turned, clutching the sheet tighter around me, expecting, hoping, to see Dominic returning. Instead, a woman stepped into the penthouse. She was strikingly beautiful, with cascading dark hair and eyes the same amber as Dominic's. She wore a sleek designer dress and carried a small gift bag in one manicured hand. She stopped short when she saw me, her perfectly arched eyebrows rising in surprise. "Well," she said, her voice carrying a hint of the same accent as Dominic's, "this is unexpected." I stood frozen, acutely aware of my state of undress and the obvious implications of my presence in Dominic's penthouse at this hour, wrapped in nothing but his bedsheet. "I'm Elise," I managed to say, my voice embarrassingly small. The woman's eyes traveled over me, assessing and cataloging in a way that reminded me uncomfortably of Dominic. A smile curved her lips, not entirely friendly. "I'm Sophia," she said, "Dominic's sister." Sister. The word hung in the air between us, reshaping my understanding of the photograph I'd just been studying. The older man must be their father. The family resemblance was striking. "Dominic didn't mention you," I said, immediately regretting how accusatory it sounded. Sophia's smile widened, becoming more genuine. "I'm not surprised. My brother isn't known for sharing personal details." She moved further into the apartment, with the easy familiarity of someone who had been there many times before, especially not with his guests. The slight pause before guests told me exactly what she thought of my presence here. Heat crept up my neck, staining my cheeks. "He asked me to wait for him," I said, feeling the need to justify my presence, to make it clear I hadn't just been a one-night stand. Sophia set the gift bag on the sleek coffee table and regarded me with curious eyes. "Did he now?" How interesting. Before I could respond, she glanced at her watch, a delicate gold thing that probably cost more than 6 months of my rent. I can't stay. I just dropped by to leave a birthday gift for our father. The party is tonight. She tilted her head, studying me. But now I'm wondering if my brother will be bringing a +1. The implication that Dominic might bring me to a family gathering sent a flutter of panic through me. I don't think— No need to be nervous, Sophia interrupted, her smile now openly amused, though I'd suggest wearing something other than Egyptian cotton, no matter how well it suits you. I clutched the sheet tighter around me, mortification making it hard to meet her gaze. I'll keep that in mind. Sophia moved toward the elevator, then paused, turning back to me with a more serious expression. A word of advice, Elise? My brother is complicated. Be careful. It was the second warning I'd received about Dominic in less than 24 hours, and this one sent a chill down my spine. Careful of what exactly? Something flickered in Sophia's eyes. Concern, perhaps, or caution. Of getting in too deep, too quickly. She pressed the elevator button. Dominic doesn't do casual, but his version of serious comes with complications. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside, giving me one last appraising look. It was nice meeting you, Elise. I have a feeling we'll be seeing each other again. The doors closed, and I was alone once more, her words echoing in my mind. Complications. It seemed everyone was determined to warn me about Dominic Russo without actually telling me what I needed to be warned about. I looked down at the sheet wrapped around me and made a decision. I needed answers. And standing around in Dominic's bedsheet wasn't going to get them for me. I returned to the bedroom and found my clothes from the night before, neatly folded on a chair, Dominic's doing, I assumed, since I'd been too distracted to care where they landed as he'd peeled them off me. The memory sent heat pooling in my belly, but I pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. Once dressed, I began a more thorough exploration of the penthouse. The place was immaculate, designed for comfort and luxury, but with minimal personal touches. The kitchen was fully stocked, but looked barely used. A home office contained an imposing desk and state-of-the-art computer setup, but the desk drawers were locked. I was about to give up my snooping as fruitless when I noticed a door that was slightly ajar. Pushing it open revealed a room I hadn't seen before, a smaller, more intimate space that stood in stark contrast to the minimalist aesthetic of the rest of the penthouse. This room felt lived in, personal. A well-worn leather armchair sat beside a small table stacked with books. A record player and collection of vinyl records occupied one corner. The walls were lined with bookshelves, but these held more than just books. There were photographs, small artifacts that looked like souvenirs from various countries, and what appeared to be handwritten letters in protective sleeves. This, I realized, was the real Dominic, or at least more of him than he showed to the world. I moved to the photographs, studying each one. Dominic as a teenager, standing proudly beside a sleek motorcycle. Dominic and Sophia as children, dressed formally for what looked like a church service. The man I presumed to be their father, younger in this photo, holding a newborn baby while a beautiful woman looked on with exhausted joy. Dominic's mother, perhaps? One photo in particular caught my attention. It showed Dominic, perhaps in his mid-20s, standing with a group of men in expensive suits. They were arranged in a semicircle around an older man seated in an ornate chair, the same man from the other photographs, but older, more imposing. The setting was opulent, old-world European luxury, and there was something about the way the men stood, the deferential postures, that reminded me of medieval court paintings, kings and their trusted advisors, or in more modern terms, a Mafia don and his captains. The thought sent ice through my veins, even as I tried to dismiss it as ridiculous. But was it? The private security, the gun holster, the scars on Dominic's body, the rapid response to a business call on a Saturday morning, the deference people showed him, it all began to form a picture I didn't want to see. I was still staring at the photograph when I heard a sound behind me. I whirled around to find a man standing in the doorway. Not Dominic, but one of the security guards I'd seen at the restaurant. Anton, I realized. The same one who had driven us that first rainy night. "Miss Parker," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Mr. Russo didn't mention you would be exploring his private study." Caught red-handed, I fumbled for an explanation. The door was open, and Anton's expression remained impassive. Perhaps you would be more comfortable in the main living area. May I get you something to eat or drink? It wasn't a suggestion, despite the polite phrasing. I set the photograph back on the shelf, my cheeks burning with embarrassment and a touch of fear. Yes, of course, I'm sorry. I didn't realize this was off limits. Mr. Russo values his privacy, Anton said, stepping aside to let me pass. He closed the study door firmly behind us, then escorted me to the kitchen. Coffee? Tea? Perhaps something stronger. Coffee would be great, I said, settling onto one of the high stools at the kitchen island, trying to appear more composed than I felt. Thank you. Anton moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, preparing an espresso machine that looked complicated enough to launch a spacecraft. Did you sleep well? He asked, the question perfectly polite but loaded with meaning. Yes, thank you, I replied, equally polite. Then, because I couldn't help myself, I added, Anton, how long have you worked for Dominic? He glanced at me, his expression giving nothing away. 10 years. That's a long time. You must know him well. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I know enough. Enough to serve him loyally. Anton placed a cup of espresso in front of me, along with a small pitcher of cream and a bowl of sugar cubes, and to recognize when someone is fishing for information. I felt heat rise to my cheeks again. I'm just trying to understand who he is. Anton regarded me for a long moment, his eyes assessing. Mr. Russo is a private man, Miss Parker. If he wishes you to know more about him, he will tell you himself. I sipped my espresso, rich, dark, and perfect, and considered my options. Direct questioning clearly wasn't going to work, but perhaps a different approach might. The woman who was just here, I said casually. Sophia. She mentioned a birthday party for their father tonight. Anton's expression didn't change, but something in his posture tightened. Did she? Yes. She seemed to think Dominic might bring me as his +1. I stirred a sugar cube into my espresso, watching Anton carefully. Would that be unusual? Very, he said after a brief hesitation. Mr. Russo doesn't typically bring guests to family functions. I see. I took another sip of my coffee. So, it would be a big deal then. Me meeting his father. Anton's gaze sharpened. It would be unprecedented, Miss Parker. Which is why it won't happen. The bluntness of his statement stung more than it should have. Because I'm nobody important. Because you're a waitress Mr. Russo met a week ago. His tone wasn't unkind, just matter of fact. The family birthday is for family. Family. There was something in the way he said the word, something that reinforced my growing suspicions about exactly what kind of family Dominic belonged to. Before I could pursue that line of questioning, my phone rang. I fished it out of my purse, expecting to see Dominic's number, but instead found my manager's name on the screen. With a grimace, I answered. Elise, where the hell are you? Sarah's voice was sharp with irritation. Your shift started half an hour ago. I closed my eyes, mentally kicking myself. In the whirlwind of last night and this morning, I'd completely forgotten that I was scheduled to work the lunch shift today. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I'm not feeling well. The lie came easily, too easily. You sound fine to me, she said suspiciously. This isn't like you, Elise. I know, I'm really sorry. It hit me suddenly. Some kind of stomach bug, I think. I forced a weak tone into my voice, aware of Anton watching me with barely concealed amusement. Sarah sighed. Fine. I've already called in Jenny to cover for you. But I'm marking this as an unexcused absence, Elise. One more, and we'll have to have a serious conversation about your future here. The threat sent a spike of anxiety through me. I couldn't afford to lose this job. I understand. It won't happen again. See that it doesn't. She hung up without saying goodbye. I set my phone down, avoiding Anton's gaze. I should go, I said, sliding off the stool. Please tell Dominic I had to leave for work. Mr. Russo asked you to wait for him. Anton reminded me, his tone neutral, and I'd like to, but I need my job. I gathered my purse, searching for my shoes, which I eventually found neatly placed by the couch. Please let him know I'll call him later. Anton followed me to the elevator, his presence a silent reminder of his role as both servant and gatekeeper. As the doors opened, he said, "Miss Parker." I turned, one foot already in the elevator. Mr. Russo does not appreciate being disobeyed. His expression was serious, his eyes conveying a warning that made my stomach clench. When he asks something of you, it's best to comply. Fear skittered down my spine, mingling with indignation. I'm not one of his employees, Anton. I don't take orders from him. A smile ghosted across Anton's face. Don't you? The elevator doors closed before I could respond, leaving me alone with my swirling thoughts and the uncomfortable realization that I might be in far deeper than I'd imagined. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, going through the motions of my normal Saturday routine. Laundry at the rundown laundromat down the street, grocery shopping with my carefully budgeted list, a quick call to check on my elderly neighbor. All the while, my mind kept returning to Dominic, to his penthouse, to the photograph of men standing around a seated patriarch, to Anton's warning. By evening, I was exhausted, both physically and mentally. I'd checked my phone obsessively all day, but there had been no call, no text from Dominic. Perhaps he'd returned to find me gone and decided I wasn't worth the trouble. The thought shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. I was soaking in my tiny bathtub, trying to ease the tension in my muscles, when my doorbell rang. I ignored it at first, probably just kids playing pranks or someone with the wrong apartment. But when it rang again, more insistently, I sighed and climbed out of the tub, wrapping myself in a threadbare towel. "Coming," I called, padding to the door with wet feet, leaving small puddles on the worn linoleum. I peered through the peephole and my heart nearly stopped. Dominic stood in the hallway, his expression thunderous, flanked by Anton and another man I didn't recognize. All three wore formal suits, and Dominic carried what looked like a garment bag over one arm. I opened the door a crack, acutely aware of my state of undress and dripping hair. "Dominic, what are you doing here?" His eyes raked over me, lingering on the droplets of water trailing down my neck to disappear beneath the towel. "You left." "I had to work," I explained, clutching the towel tighter. "I asked Anton to tell you." "He did." Dominic's voice was controlled, but I could sense the anger simmering beneath the surface. "May we come in?" It wasn't really a question. I stepped back, opening the door wider, painfully conscious of how shabby my apartment must look to these men, with their expensive suits and luxury lifestyles. Dominic entered first, his presence immediately making my small living room seem even smaller. Anton and the other man followed, taking positions near the door like sentinels. "I need to get dressed," I said, fighting the urge to apologize for my apartment, for my poverty, for everything that made me so different from Dominic's world. "No." The single word stopped me in my tracks. Dominic held up the garment bag. "You'll wear this." "What? Why?" I looked from the bag to his face, confusion warring with indignation. "Where are we going?" "To my father's birthday celebration." His tone made it clear this was not open for discussion. "You have 30 minutes to shower, fix your hair, and get ready. Anton will assist you if needed." I stared at him, disbelief giving way to anger. "Excuse me? You can't just show up at my apartment and start giving orders. I never agreed to go to any party." Dominic stepped closer, his heightened presence intimidating in the confined space of my apartment. "You agreed to wait for me, Elise. Instead, you left. You went through my private study without permission, and now you're refusing a simple request to accompany me to an important family event." His voice dropped lower, more dangerous. "I'm beginning to think you don't understand how this works." "How what works?" I demanded, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. "What exactly is this, Dominic? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you think you own me after one night together." A muscle ticked in his jaw, and his eyes darkened to molten amber. "I don't own you, Elise, not yet. But make no mistake, when I want something, I get it. And right now, I want you by my side tonight." The possessiveness in his tone sent a confusing mix of fear and desire coursing through me. This was not the charming, controlled man who had danced with me in an empty restaurant. This was someone else, someone used to command, to obedience. Someone dangerous. I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. Why me? Why tonight? Your sister said you never bring anyone to family functions. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, that I had spoken to Sophia. My sister talks too much. She was just being friendly, I said defensively. Sophia is never just anything. He set the garment bag on my couch and closed the distance between us, one hand coming up to cup my cheek. His touch was gentle, at odds with the intensity in his eyes. Tonight is important, Elise. I want you there. Please. The please caught me off guard. It was the first time he'd asked rather than commanded, and it disarmed me more effectively than all his intimidation tactics. Why is it important for me to be there? I pressed, not quite ready to surrender. His thumb stroked my cheekbone, leaving a trail of fire in its wake. Because I want my father to meet the woman carrying his grandchild. The world tilted beneath my feet. What are you talking about? Dominic's eyes never left mine, watching every nuance of my expression. You're pregnant, Elise, with my child. That's impossible, I whispered, my voice barely audible even in the quiet apartment. We were together once, last night. Dominic's expression remained unreadable. Once is all it takes, but how would you even know? I don't know. My mind raced, trying to calculate days and dates. My period was due next week. There were no symptoms, no signs, nothing to indicate a pregnancy. There's no way you could know. A small enigmatic smile touched his lips. I know. I stepped back, needing distance from his overwhelming presence, from the certainty in his voice that shook me to my core. You're lying. You're trying to manipulate me into going with you tonight. His eyes hardened. I don't lie, Elise. Not to you. Then you're mistaken, I insisted, my voice rising with panic. It's too soon to know. Not for my doctor. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope, holding it out to me. Your blood work from this morning. I stared at the envelope, not reaching for it. What are you talking about? I didn't have any blood work done. You did. While you were sleeping. His tone was matter of fact, as if having blood drawn from a sleeping woman without her consent was perfectly normal. Standard procedure for all my guests. The casual violation sent a wave of nausea through me, followed quickly by rage. You had no right. That's assault. It's illegal. Many things I do are illegal, Elise. His honesty was more frightening than any threat could have been. But I take care of what's mine, and now that includes you and our child. Our child? The words hung in the air between us. Impossible, yet terrifyingly plausible. I'd been on birth control, but I'd missed a pill 2 days before our night together. A simple oversight in the chaos of my car being repossessed and working double shifts. Could that have been enough? This is crazy, I said, wrapping my arms around my middle, suddenly feeling vulnerable in just a towel. Even if it were true, and I'm not saying it is, you can't just make decisions for me. You can't control me. I can protect you, he countered, his expression softening slightly. Both of you. From what? I demanded, frustration building. What exactly are you so afraid of, Dominic? What danger am I supposedly in? He was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching mine. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of his world, he said, My father is Vittorio Russo, head of the Russo crime family for the past 30 years. The confirmation of my suspicions should have terrified me, but instead, it brought a strange sense of relief. Finally, the truth. You're in the Mafia. I'm next in line to lead the family business, he corrected, as if the distinction mattered. My father is retiring after tonight's celebration. By midnight, I will be taking his place. The implications were staggering. The man before me, the man I'd slept with, the man who claimed I was carrying his child, was about to become one of the most powerful criminal figures in the city, possibly the country. And you think this is something I want to be part of? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady given the storm of emotions raging inside me. You think I want to raise a child in that world? I think you have no choice, Dominic said, his tone gentler than his words. If you are carrying my child, and you are, then you are already part of my world. The only question is whether you'll accept my protection willingly or force me to impose it. That sounds like a threat. It's a reality. He moved closer again, his presence overwhelming in the small space. My enemies would see you and our child as leverage against me. I won't allow that to happen. So what? I'm supposed to just, what, move into your penthouse? Become your mob wife? Live under lock and key for the rest of my life? The future he was describing sounded like a gilded cage, no matter how he tried to frame it. For now, yes, he said simply. Until I've secured my position and neutralized the most immediate threats. After that, we can discuss more flexible arrangements. And if I refuse? Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Don't test me, Elise. Not on this. Fear skittered down my spine, but I refused to be intimidated. Or what? You'll force me? Kidnap me? Kill me? Dominic moved with startling speed, his hands cupping my face, his eyes boring into mine with an intensity that stole my breath. I would never harm you, never. But don't mistake my restraint for weakness. When it comes to protecting what's mine, there are no limits to what I will do. I should have been terrified. I should have screamed, fought, run. Instead, I found myself captivated by the raw emotion in his eyes, the fierce protectiveness, the possessiveness that bordered on obsession, the vulnerability beneath his control that few would ever see. Why me? I whispered. Of all the women in the world, why did you choose me? His thumbs stroked my cheekbones, his touch gentler than his words. I didn't choose, Elise. From the moment I found you in my car, soaking wet and defiant, there was no choice. Only inevitability. The intensity of his gaze made it hard to breathe, hard to think. You don't even know me. I know enough, he murmured, his face so close to mine I could feel his breath on my lips. I know you're strong, resilient. I know you fight for what you want, what you need. I know you've been alone too long, carrying burdens that should be shared. His fingers trailed down to my neck, finding my pulse point, and I know that when I touch you, your heart races, just like mine. He was right, damn him. Despite everything, the fear, the anger, the shock, my body responded to his proximity, to his touch, to the heat in his eyes that promised both danger and protection. One night, I said finally, my resistance crumbling under the weight of his presence, his certainty. I'll go with you tonight, meet your family. But tomorrow I want proof, real proof, from my own doctor, about this supposed pregnancy, and then we'll talk about what happens next. No decisions, no arrangements, until I know for sure. Relief flickered across his face, so brief I almost missed it. Agreed. He stepped back, giving me space to breathe again. 30 minutes, Elise. The dress is Valentino. Anton will help with your jewelry and accessories. Just like that, he was back to issuing commands, but now I recognized it for what it was. Not just arrogance, but the ingrained habit of a man born to lead, to control, to protect. I nodded, taking the garment bag from the couch and heading toward my bedroom. At the doorway, I paused, looking back at Dominic. If this is real, the pregnancy, what makes you so sure I'll agree to be part of your world? His smile was slow, confident, almost tender. Because you already are, Elise. You just don't know it yet. The Valentino dress was a deep crimson, the color of wine in firelight, of blood in water. It fit as if made for me, the silk clinging to curves I hadn't known I possessed. Anton had indeed come prepared with jewelry, a simple diamond pendant and matching earrings that I suspected were real and terrifyingly expensive. When I emerged from my bedroom, Dominic's eyes darkened with appreciation and something more possessive, more primal. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, taking my hands in his. Beautiful, he murmured, lifting my fingers to his lips. But something's missing. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a ring, a massive oval diamond surrounded by smaller stones, set in platinum. An engagement ring. My breath caught in my throat. Dominic. A formality, he said, his eyes never leaving mine as he slid the ring onto my finger. For tonight, to avoid unnecessary questions. The weight of the ring felt disproportionate to its size, as if it carried the burden of a future I hadn't chosen, a life I hadn't planned. But I didn't remove it. Instead, I watched as it caught the light, scattering rainbows across my hand. "It was my mother's," Dominic said quietly. The admission stunned me, not a hastily purchased prop for tonight's charade, but a family heirloom, a piece of his history, his heart. The gesture spoke volumes about his intentions, his certainty that we, would be part of his future. "Thank you," I said, not knowing what else to say. He nodded once, satisfied, and offered his arm. "Shall we?" The ride to the Russo family estate was silent, tense with unspoken words and unanswered questions. I sat beside Dominic in the back of a different car, a sleek black SUV with bulletproof windows according to Anton, watching the city give way to upscale suburbs, then to vast gated estates that spoke of old money and older power. The Russo mansion was a sprawling Italianate villa set back from the road, its grounds illuminated by tasteful landscape lighting. Security checkpoints dotted the long driveway, each manned by suited men with earpieces and barely concealed weapons. They nodded respectfully to Dominic as our car passed, their eyes lingering curiously on me. "Remember," Dominic said as we approached the main house, "you are my fiancé. We've been seeing each other discreetly for months. You're carrying my child, and we couldn't be happier about it." I turned to him, eyebrow raised. "That's quite a story. What happened to your policy of not lying?" "Half-truths," he corrected, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You are carrying my child, and I couldn't be happier about it." Before I could respond, the car stopped at the foot of a grand marble staircase leading to the mansion's entrance. A valet opened Dominic's door, and he stepped out, coming around to my side to help me. His hand at the small of my back was both supportive and possessive as we climbed the stairs. The doors opened as we approached, revealing a butler in formal attire. "Mr. Russo," he greeted, bowing slightly. "And Miss Parker," Dominic supplied. "My fiancé." The butler's composure slipped for just a moment, his eyes widening slightly before he regained his professional demeanor. "Of course, sir. Miss Parker, the family is gathered in the main salon." We followed him through a grand foyer, past priceless artwork and antiques that spoke of generations of wealth and power. The house was palatial, intimidating in its opulence, yet there was a warmth to it that surprised me. Family photographs on side tables, fresh flowers arranged in vases, the scent of home-cooked Italian food wafting from somewhere deep in the house. As we approached the salon, I could hear voices, animated conversation, laughter, the clink of glasses. Dominic squeezed my hand, a gesture of reassurance that I found oddly comforting despite everything. "Ready?" he murmured. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and we stepped into the room. Conversation halted as heads turned toward us. The salon was filled with people, men in expensive suits, women in designer dresses, a few children playing in one corner under the watchful eyes of what appeared to be nannies. At the center of it all, seated in a high-backed chair that could have passed for a throne, was the man from the photographs, Vittorio Russo, patriarch of the Russo crime family. He was older than in the pictures I'd seen, his once dark hair now silver, but his eyes, the same amber as Dominic's, were sharp and alert. He wore his age and his power with the ease of a man who had earned both, his expression impassive as he watched our entrance. Beside him stood Sophia, resplendent in a midnight blue gown, her eyebrows raised in surprise, or perhaps challenge, at my presence on Dominic's arm. "Father," Dominic said, leading me forward to stand before Vittorio, "I'd like to introduce you to Elise Parker, my fiancée, and the mother of your future grandchild." A collective gasp rippled through the room, followed by excited whispers and speculative glances. Vittorio remained silent, his gaze traveling from Dominic to me, then down to the ring on my finger, his late wife's ring, I now realized. "Fiancé," he repeated, his accent thicker than Dominic's, his voice carrying the weight of authority that came from decades at the helm of a criminal empire. "This is unexpected. For everyone, it seems," Sophia murmured. But she stepped forward to kiss me on both cheeks, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Welcome to the family, Elise." "Thank you," I managed, feeling dozens of eyes on me, assessing, judging, calculating what my presence meant for the balance of power within the family. Vittorio beckoned me closer. "Let me see you, girl." I approached, conscious of Dominic's steadying presence beside me. Vittorio took my hand, examining the ring, then looked up at my face with those penetrating amber eyes. "You are afraid," he observed, "but not of me. Interesting." "I'm not afraid of what you are," I said, finding my voice at last. "Only of what it means for my future. For our child's future." Something like approval flickered across his weathered features. Honesty. "Good. There is too little of it in our world." He glanced at Dominic. "You chose well, my son. She has spirit." "I know," Dominic replied, his hand finding the small of my back again, warm and reassuring. Vittorio turned his attention back to me. "My son tells me you carry my grandchild, the next generation of Russo blood." His hand, gnarled with age but still strong, came to rest on my still flat stomach. A blessing. A future for our family. The gesture was intimate, presumptuous, yet strangely moving. This powerful, dangerous man already saw my unborn child, if there even was one, as his legacy, his immortality. "I will protect you," Vittorio said, his voice low enough that only Dominic and I could hear. "Both of you, as will Dominic. The Russo family takes care of its own, thank you," I said, not knowing what else to say. He nodded once, then released my hand, turning to address the gathered family members. "Tonight, we celebrate not one transition, but two. My retirement, and the announcement of a new Russo generation to come." Cheers erupted. Glasses were raised, and suddenly we were surrounded by well-wishers, family members eager to meet Dominic's mysterious fiancée and congratulate us on the pregnancy. Through it all, Dominic kept me close, his arm around my waist, his presence a shield against the overwhelming tide of strangers and their expectations. Hours later, after dinner and dancing and the formal ceremony transferring leadership from father to son, Dominic led me to a quiet balcony overlooking the estate's gardens. The night air was cool against my heated skin, a welcome respite from the crowded rooms and constant scrutiny. "You did well," he said, his voice warm with pride as he handed me a glass of water. No alcohol, I noted, because of the baby he was so certain existed. Did I have a choice? I leaned against the stone balustrade, looking out over the immaculate grounds. Security personnel patrolled the perimeter, their dark forms barely visible in the shadows. "Your family is intense." Dominic chuckled, the sound low and intimate in the quiet night. "That's one word for them. Scary is another," I admitted. "They won't hurt you, Elise." His hand covered mine on the balustrade, warm and strong. "No one will. As long as you're with me." I turned to face him, really looking at him in the moonlight. He was devastatingly handsome in his formal wear, power and danger wrapped in civilized clothing. But I was beginning to see beyond that. To the man who had danced with me in an empty restaurant, who had given me his mother's ring, who looked at me as if I were the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. "And if I'm not carrying your child?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me all evening. "What then?" His expression remained unchanged. "You are." "But if I'm not," I pressed. "If this was all a misunderstanding or a manipulation to get me here tonight, what happens tomorrow when we find out the truth?" Dominic stepped closer, one hand coming up to cup my cheek. "The truth, Elise, is that from the moment I found you in my car, you were meant to be mine. Child or no child, that hasn't changed. You can't just claim people, Dominic. Life doesn't work that way." "My life does." His thumb traced my bottom lip, sending shivers down my spine despite my best efforts to remain unmoved. "But if it makes you feel better, I'll make you a promise. Tomorrow we'll go to your doctor, and if you're not pregnant, you'll be free to walk away. No consequences, no pursuit. A clean break." The offer was unexpected, tempting. A way out, back to my normal life, away from this dangerous world of power and secrets. But even as he made the promise, I knew it was empty. Whether through fate or manipulation or sheer force of will, Dominic Russo had already claimed me, and some traitorous part of me welcomed it. "And if I am pregnant?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper, His eyes darkened, possessive and tender at once. Then you'll be my wife, the mother of my heir, protected and cherished for the rest of your life. No more struggling, no more fighting alone. Everything I have, everything I am, will be devoted to keeping you and our child safe. It was a seductive vision: security, protection, belonging, things I'd been lacking since my mother died, and my father retreated into his new family, but it came with a price I wasn't sure I was willing to pay. I don't love you, Dominic, I said softly. I barely know you. Love can grow, he replied, confident as ever. And you know the most important thing about me already, that I will move heaven and earth to protect what's mine. Before I could respond, the balcony doors opened, and Sophia appeared, her expression serious. Dominic, father wants to speak with you, alone. Dominic tensed, then nodded. I'll be right there. He turned back to me, pressing a kiss to my forehead. Wait here. I won't be long. I watched him leave with Sophia, their heads bent close together in conversation, and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Whatever life Dominic was offering me, it would always include moments like this: secretive conversations, unspoken dangers, the knowledge that the man I was tied to lived by different rules than the rest of the world. Left alone on the balcony, I gazed up at the stars, one hand resting absently on my stomach. Was there really a life growing inside me? A tiny being that was half me, half Dominic? The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I didn't love Dominic Russo, but I couldn't deny the pull between us, the connection that had formed so quickly and burned so intensely. And if I was pregnant, there you are. I turned to find an elderly woman standing in the doorway, elegant in a simple black dress, her silver hair swept into a classic chignon. She moved toward me with a grace that belied her age, her smile warm and genuine. You must be Elise, she said, taking my hands in hers. I'm Rosa, Vittorio's sister, Dominic's aunt. It's nice to meet you, I said, surprised by the genuine welcome in her eyes when so many others had regarded me with suspicion or calculation. My nephew is quite taken with you, Rosa said, patting my hand. I haven't seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you since, well, ever. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I simply smiled, hoping it didn't look as uncertain as I felt. Rosa's gaze dropped to my stomach, then back to my face. A baby. Such a blessing. And perfect timing, with Dominic taking over the family. Perfect timing, I echoed, the words hollow on my tongue. Had it been perfect timing, or had it been engineered somehow by a man who seemed to control every aspect of his world? As if reading my thoughts, Rosa's expression softened. You're wondering if this was all part of some plan, aren't you? If Dominic somehow orchestrated everything, from your meeting to the pregnancy. I flushed, embarrassed to be so transparent. The thought had crossed my mind. Rosa laughed, a warm, rich sound that reminded me of Dominic's rare, genuine laughs. My dear, Dominic is many things. Brilliant, driven, sometimes ruthless, but even he can't control fate to that degree. She squeezed my hands. Some things are simply meant to be. Do you really believe that? I asked, longing to believe in something beyond Dominic's machinations and my own poor choices. I do. Her eyes, the same amber as Dominic's and Vittorio's, held mine. I've lived long enough to see how the universe works. Sometimes it brings together exactly the right people at exactly the right moment, for reasons we may not understand until much later. There was something comforting about her certainty, her acceptance of forces beyond human control. I'm afraid, I admitted, the words escaping before I could stop them. Of course you are, Rosa said, her voice gentle. This world we live in, it's not an easy one, but you're stronger than you think, Elise. I can see it in you, and Dominic sees it too. That's why he chose you. Did he? Choose me, I mean. Or was I just convenient? Rosa's laugh surprised me. My dear, nothing about you is convenient for Dominic. You challenge him, question him, make him work for what he wants. No, you weren't convenient. You were necessary. Before I could ask what she meant, the balcony doors opened again, and Dominic appeared, his expression unreadable. Aunt Rosa, he said, kissing her cheek. I see you've met Elise. Indeed I have, Rosa replied with a knowing smile. She's exactly what you need, nephew. She patted my hand once more, then moved toward the doors. Don't stay out too long, you two. It's getting chilly. And in her condition, Elise should be kept warm. When she was gone, Dominic came to stand beside me at the balustrade, his shoulder touching mine. What did my aunt tell you? That I'm exactly what you need, I replied, mimicking Rosa's tone. Though I'm not sure what that means, Dominic's smile was small, but genuine. It means she likes you, and that's no small thing. Rosa's approval carries weight in this family. More than your father's? Different, but equally important. He turned to face me, his expression serious. Speaking of my father, there's been a change of plans. My heart sank. What kind of change? We're staying here tonight, at the estate. Security concerns. His tone made it clear that further explanation would not be forthcoming. My old room has been prepared for us. Us, I repeated, the implications clear. Dominic, it's just for tonight, Elise, he said, his voice softening. Tomorrow, after we visit your doctor, we can discuss more permanent arrangements. The reminder of tomorrow's appointment, and the promise he'd made about letting me go if I wasn't pregnant, hung between us. Part of me hoped the test would be negative, giving me an escape from this world I'd stumbled into. But another part, a part I wasn't ready to examine too closely, hoped for a different outcome. Dominic's hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with mine, warm and strong. One night, Elise. That's all I'm asking for now. I looked up at him, this dangerous, complicated man who had upended my world in the span of a week, who claimed to know I was carrying his child before I knew myself, who offered protection, security, belonging, everything I'd been lacking for so long. One night, I agreed, squeezing his hand. And tomorrow we find out the truth. His smile was slow, confident, as if he already knew what tomorrow would bring. And perhaps he did. Perhaps he'd known from the moment I'd sought shelter from the rain in his car that our fates were intertwined, our futures bound together by forces beyond our control or by his own implacable will. Either way, as he led me back into the mansion, through the crowd of his family, his crime family, I reminded myself, toward the winding staircase that would take us to his childhood bedroom, I knew that my life had changed irrevocably. For better or worse, I was part of Dominic Russo's world now. And tomorrow we would discover if I was carrying the heir to his criminal empire, the ultimate golden cage, from which there would be no escape. The morning sunlight filtered through heavy curtains, casting the bedroom in a warm glow. I lay awake, watching Dominic sleep beside me, his features relaxed in a way they never were when he was conscious. In sleep, the dangerous Mafia Heir was just a man, handsome, vulnerable, human. My hand drifted to my stomach, still flat, unchanged. Was there really a life growing inside me, a tiny being that would bind me to Dominic and his world forever? The doctor's appointment was scheduled for 10 o'clock. Just 2 hours from now, by noon, I would know my fate. As if sensing my thoughts, Dominic's eyes opened, instantly alert. He reached for me, pulling me against his chest, his heartbeat strong and steady beneath my ear. "Morning," he murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "Morning," I replied, my voice muffled against his skin. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in years." His hand traced lazy patterns on my bare back. "You?" Surprisingly, yes, it was true. Despite everything, I had slept soundly in his arms, in this fortress of a mansion with its armed guards and security systems. We lay in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the tension of the upcoming appointment hovering unspoken between us. Finally, Dominic spoke, his voice serious. "Whatever happens today, Elise, I want you to know something." He tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his gaze. "This isn't just about the baby. It never was." "Then what is it about?" I asked, needing to hear him say it. His eyes, those burning amber eyes that had captivated me from the beginning, held mine with unwavering intensity. "It's about you. About us. About the fact that from the moment I found you in my car, I knew you were mine. People aren't possessions, Dominic," I said softly, even as something inside me responded to his certainty, his claim. "No, he agreed. They're more complex, more valuable, more worthy of protection. His hand moved to my stomach, warm and possessive. But some people are meant to be together, Elise. Call it fate, call it destiny, call it my stubbornness, but you and I were meant to find each other. I wanted to argue, to resist his certainty, his arrogance. But as his lips found mine in a kiss that was both tender and possessive, I found myself surrendering to the connection between us, a connection that had formed in the rain, strengthened in the night, and now promised a future I'd never imagined. Later, as we dressed for the doctor's appointment, me in clothes Dominic had somehow had delivered to the mansion, he in another impeccable suit, I caught him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "What?" I asked, self-conscious under his scrutiny. "Nothing," he said, but his smile told me it was far from nothing. "I was just thinking how right you look here. With me, the simple statement shouldn't have affected me as deeply as it did, but after years of feeling out of place, unwanted, invisible, the recognition, the belonging, was more intoxicating than I wanted to admit." In the car on the way to my doctor's office, Dominic held my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. The gesture was soothing, grounding, as if he sensed my growing anxiety about what we would learn. "Remember your promise," I said, as the car pulled up outside the medical building. "If I'm not pregnant, you'll be free to walk away," he finished, his expression unreadable. I remember. But something in his tone, in the set of his jaw, told me it wouldn't be that simple. Dominic Russo was not a man who easily let go of what he considered his. And somehow, against all logic, against all my better judgment, he had decided I belonged to him. As we entered the doctor's office, Dominic's hand at the small of my back, I realized with sudden clarity that regardless of the test results, I was already entangled in his world, already bound to him in ways that went beyond a potential pregnancy. I had stepped into Dominic Russo's car seeking shelter from the rain, not knowing that I would find shelter of a different kind. Dangerous, complicated, but more secure than anything I'd known before. Not knowing that I would end up potentially carrying the Mafia king's heir. Not knowing that, pregnant or not, I had already been claimed. And as we waited for the doctor to call my name, Dominic's confident presence beside me, I admitted a truth I'd been fighting since that rainy night. Part of me, a growing part, welcomed the claiming. "Elise Parker?" The nurse stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand. I stood, Dominic rising with me, his hand never leaving mine. "Ready?" he asked, his eyes holding mine. "For the test, for the truth, for the life that awaited us regardless of the outcome. A life with this dangerous, possessive, captivating man who had upended my world in the span of a week." "Ready," I replied, and stepped forward into my future.